Look back at the Roman Empire, and its rise can feel entirely unstoppable. For centuries, it was the ultimate power of the Mediterranean, shaping the laws, the infrastructure, and the borders of the ancient world. But that vast empire nearly disappeared before it could fully take shape. Long before it reached its peak, Rome was pushed so close to total collapse by a single commander that Roman parents reportedly used his name to frighten their children. To understand why, we have to look at the power Rome defeated to claim dominance: Carthage. After the devastating First Punic War, Carthage lost its territory, its influence, and its pride. They were left with a humiliated population and a fractured empire. Among that population was a respected military leader named Hannibal Barca. Ancient accounts tell us he brought his young son, Hannibal, before a religious altar and demanded a promise. The boy swore eternal hostility toward the Roman Republic. Whether the details of that altar story are entirely accurate hardly matters, because the rest of his life proved the point. Hannibal grew up in a world defined by this rivalry, taking a standard territorial conflict and turning it into a singular, obsessive mission to break the strongest military power on Earth. By the time Hannibal assumed command, Rome controlled the sea and held immense manpower. A direct attack was out of the question, so he decided to bring the war directly to the Italian peninsula through an unprotected, freezing route that Roman strategists considered entirely impassable. The journey over the Alps was a terrifying slog through hostile terrain. Thousands of Carthaginian soldiers perished in the snow, entire units vanished into the mountains, and critical supplies were lost over steep cliffs. Adding to this logistical nightmare, Hannibal brought along war elephants. Marching these massive animals through narrow, freezing passes was an agonizing process that pushed his army to its absolute physical limits. Yet, a portion of the army survived. Simply emerging on the Italian side of the mountains achieved his first major objective. He completely bypassed Rome's coastal defenses and placed a battle-hardened, unpredictable force right inside their borders. The Romans expected to crush this exhausted invading force immediately. Instead, at the Battle of Trebia, Hannibal used the freezing weather and the local terrain to outmaneuver Rome's rigid infantry formations, dealing them a heavy initial blow. He followed this up at Lake Trasimene with one of the most precise ambushes in military history. Knowing exactly how Roman commanders would pursue him, Hannibal drew their marching columns into a narrow path along the water and trapped them, slaughtering thousands. The resulting panic rapidly spread down the Italian peninsula. Citizens realized an enemy army was freely roaming the countryside, and their own vaunted legions seemed entirely powerless to stop it. Hannibal recognized that killing soldiers wasn't enough to defeat a superpower. He needed to make the Roman state doubt its own competence. Every ambush eroded their confidence and built an aura of invincibility around himself. To stop the bleeding, Rome assembled a massive army, determined to use sheer numerical superiority to crush the invaders on the flat plains of Cannae. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. This diagram shows exactly how Hannibal countered that massive force. He placed his weakest troops in the center, instructing them to slowly retreat and absorb the Roman push. As the Romans drove forward, the Carthaginian flanks swung around to swallow them completely. Surrounded on all sides, the Romans couldn't even raise their weapons. Tens of thousands of men, along with a massive portion of Rome's political and military leadership, were eradicated in a single afternoon. With the primary Roman army annihilated and panic gripping the Republic, the road to the capital was wide open. Yet Hannibal chose not to march on Rome itself. Historians still debate whether his troops were too exhausted or if he simply lacked the necessary siege equipment. Whatever the reason, letting that moment slip by proved fatal. By hesitating to strike the final blow, Hannibal gave the Republic the one resource it desperately needed to mount a defense: time. Rome's true power never lay entirely in its battlefield tactics. It was built on unmatched political resilience and a seemingly endless pool of manpower drawn from its allied states. Following Cannae, Roman leadership made a humiliating but crucial pivot. They stopped trying to beat Hannibal in pitched battles. Instead, they shadowed his movements, harassed his supply lines, and refused to give him another chance to deploy his tactical brilliance. Hannibal spent years wandering Italy, winning minor skirmishes that got him nowhere. He couldn't secure the heavy siege equipment necessary to take walled cities, and the politicians back in Carthage sent almost no reinforcements to sustain his campaign. Meanwhile, Rome simply absorbed the massive casualties that would have caused any other ancient civilization to surrender. They raised new legions year after year, slowly bleeding the Carthaginian forces dry. The conflict revealed a harsh reality of ancient warfare. A brilliant commander can dominate the battlefield with surprise and maneuverability, but logistics, deep resources, and pure attrition ultimately decide who wins the war. As Hannibal remained bogged down in Italy, a new Roman commander emerged. Scipio was a survivor of Cannae who had carefully studied Hannibal's methods and learned how to counter them. Rather than fighting Hannibal in Italy, Scipio took the Roman army directly to North Africa. By threatening the city of Carthage itself, he forced Hannibal to abandon his 2-decade campaign and rush home to defend his capital. At the Battle of Zama, the roles reversed. Hannibal found himself on the defensive against a well-prepared, numerically superior Roman force. His army was defeated, ending the war and extinguishing his lifelong dream of bringing down the Republic. Despite losing the war, Hannibal achieved a sort of immortality. His Alpine crossing and his maneuvers at Cannae are still studied by military academies today as masterclasses in tactical execution. But the true legacy of this war lies in what it did to the victors. Rome survived, but the extreme militarization, the ambition, and the deep national trauma required to endure Hannibal left a permanent mark. The Republic became hardened, setting in motion the very internal conflicts that would eventually tear it apart from the inside.